All right, let's get it rolling. Hi everyone, I'm Natalie Welch. I'm assistant professor in the School of Business. I'm also our faculty athletics rep, and I'm also kind of one of the helpers with the WildX weekly exchange. And we're really excited to have B from the Linfield University Pride organization with us to share a little bit about LGBTQ plus a little history lesson for us, which we're really excited about in celebration of Pride Week starting next week, right? Pride Week starts next week. Or are
This
we in
week.
it
This is kind of our
this week?
finale. Mhm.
Oh, okay. So finale. I know we had a trans day of recognition awareness earlier this week, so that was really great. Some really great stuff out there. And so I just want to give Kibbs a chance to give a little intro too, as our other WildX facilitator.
Yeah, hi, I'm Coach Kibbs. I coach the women's lacrosse team here at Linfield University, and just grateful to be considered a part of WildX at all. We love having this opportunity week to week to help give other people a platform or some spotlight to talk about what they're passionate about. So really looking forward to listening to B today. Thank you. And I think B, I think you're good to go to take it over.
Okay, great. Let me go ahead and resume sharing my screen. Yeah, I'm B. I am the current president of the Linfield University Pride, also Linfield United and Pride. We kind of go between the two, kind of known as a loop. We're formerly known as Fusion. We decided to go ahead and change our name to be sort of kind of acronym. That's not exactly the correct term. I can't remember it, but that's okay. I am a junior. I am a literature major, and I am super excited to be here. So I am doing a presentation on LGBT historical figures and kind of the significance as to why we should be celebrating them, why we're talking about them, and why it still matters today. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. It's going to be fairly quick because I thought we could do a kind of discussion portion as well, and I wanted to make sure we had room for that. So yeah, anyway, I will get into it. Okay, so the kind of question that I want to be on our minds as we go through this presentation is, why does this matter? And I think that is a really important question because it's not a facet of history that is often talked about. And I think that it is something that we often kind of neglect to talk about as well. And one moment, I am so sorry, my presentation notes went away, so I'm going to go ahead and get those back really quick. 1 second.
No, you're all good.
I'm not used to presenting over Zoom, so with like a slideshow. So this is pretty new to me.
You're doing great.
Okay, that should be back again. All right, thank you. Yeah, so the question that I kind of want us to keep in mind as we go through this presentation is, why does this matter? And then we will circle back around to that towards the end. Okay, so who we will be discussing. The figures that I have kind of identified that I wanted to talk about are Public Universal Friend, William Dorsey Swan, Del Martin and Phyllis Lyon, Geneset Gutierrez, several different notable politicians that we'll just do a quick rundown of, and Dan Choi. Okay, and I wanted to jumpstart this by talking about the Stonewall Inn and the Stonewall riots, because I think the Stonewall riots were really regarded as the catalyst of the LGBTQ plus rights movement. The Stonewall riots were in June of 1969 and helped to bring awareness to the unjust treatment of queer and trans people in New York, mostly at the hands of law enforcement. So there was this very antiquated rule for a very long time where you had to be wearing 3 pieces of clothing from your assigned sex at birth. So typically this was like the 3 pieces of female clothing rule. And if you were perceived as a man or a woman, but weren't wearing clothing of your assigned sex at birth, then you would often be subjected to things such as like harassment from police, informal strip searches to check like underwear. And it was really invasive and terrible and really perpetuated harassment and sexual assault of LGBT people, particularly for gender nonconforming women and trans women. And these were often used during police raids of LGBTQ plus bars and other spaces, which the Stonewall Inn was. The Stonewall Inn was a like queer gay bar that had a large like drag queen population. A lot of trans people frequented it. And the Stonewall riots started during a police raid of the bar in June of 1969. And basically what happened is kind of collectively everyone decided, you know, we are not going to continue to be subject to this treatment. This is not fair. And we're going to do something about it. And it led to these like riots and protests that really helped kind of reverse, if not start the reversal process of these laws and official and unofficial laws that really were dehumanizing to queer and trans people. And it also jump-started the LGBTQ plus civil rights movement. All right, and then we're going to go back in time a little bit, and we're going to talk about public universal friend. I'll be using they, them pronouns. So public universal friend was born in 1752, November 29th, on Cumberland, Rhode Island. And they were assigned female at birth. And then after an illness, they kind of like had a spiritual revelation and rejected their birth name as well as their assigned gender, would only go by gender neutral pronouns, and changed their name to Public Universal Friend. And they regarded themselves as a, I believe it was a sort of archangel on earth, as a part of the like Quaker spiritual and faith community. And a friend was the term used by a lot of Quakers even today. They were often referred to as the Society of Friends. So Public Universal Friend really made like their own sect within the Quaker community and kind of outside the Quaker community as well. And I think they're really interesting because it's already so rare to have public figures that are publicly non-binary or kind of anything outside of the gender binary. And so having a very like radical gender neutral preacher in the 1700s and 1800s would really have been revolutionary. I think it would be revolutionary today even. So I wanted to go ahead and highlight them. They often wore more masculine clothing and really played with the perceptions of and the expectations for men and women at the time, because they dressed more masculine, but then would often reject different kind of societal norms. They wouldn't wear a head covering, which is very common for women at the time. And then they would often wear kind of a more masculine hat and all of these different things. So it was really interesting. And several of their close friends also began to refer to themselves as a last name friend. So it would be whatever their first name was, and then they would change their last name to friend. And a good portion of their followers also used gender neutral pronouns as well. So I thought this was really interesting. I had never really heard of them before I started doing this research. And I wanted to go ahead and kind of highlight that. So this picture on the left is a drawing from an 1821 biography on Public Universal Friend by David Hudson. And then on the left, or whoops, on the right, we have a painting of Public Universal Friend. I was unable to find the artist in question, but this is through the New York History Center of Yates County. So, all right. And this is William Dorsey Swann. William Dorsey Swann is regarded as the first drag queen and has been gaining more recognition, rightfully so, in the last several years as their stories coming more to light. So William Dorsey Swann was born an enslaved person in Hancock, Maryland, and then this was pre-Civil War, and then became a freed person after the Civil War because of the Emancipation Proclamation. And then during the 1880s and 1890s, Swann organized a series of drag balls in Washington, D.C., and he was self-titled the Queen of Drag. And this is him in the yellow dress in the left painting, and also again in this dress in the right picture. And this right picture is actually the cover of a book that is being written about William Dorsey Swann by Channing Gerard Joseph, and it's titled The First Drag Queen. It comes out, I believe, in 2021, so still about a year away, but nope, it's 2021 now. Whoops, who even knows what time is anymore? So yeah, that's definitely something to look forward to. Yeah, and these drag balls that William Dorsey Swann hosted were often raided by police because female impersonation and cross-dressing, and again, wearing clothes that were not prescribed to your assigned gender it was a crime. It was illegal. And I am certain that the fact that he was a freed Black man didn't help at all, especially in the South post-Civil War. And he was also falsely accused of running a disorderly house, which was the kind of proper term for a brothel. After his sentencing, he requested a pardon from the president, but this was denied. And then Swann became the first American on record who pursued legal and political action to defend the LGBT community's right to gather. So that's also really cool. And then Swann was also known to have been close with both Pierce Lafayette and Felix Hall, who were both also formerly enslaved people. And this kind of formed the first documented male same-sex relationship between formerly enslaved Black Americans, which is really cool as well. And even when Swann stopped organizing and participating in these drag balls that he would host, his brother would continue to make costumes for these balls, and his other brother would also continue to help host them. And again, I wanted to bring up William Dorsey Swann because I am really interested in kind of gender transgressions and crossing gender binaries, especially from a historical perspective. So I wanted to go ahead and give William Dorsey Swann some space in this because I think he's really cool. Okay, and then we're going to go to the 1950s. So this is Del Martin and Phyllis Lyon. In the picture on the left, Del Martin, Del Martin is the woman sitting down and Phyllis is the woman standing up. And then in the photograph on the right, Phyllis is the one in glasses and Del is the one without glasses. So Del and Phyllis co-founded this organization called the Daughters of Bilitis, which is the first political and social group for queer women. This was founded in 1955. Del and Phyllis met in the 1950s and began dating and moved in together about 2 years after in San Francisco. They lived on Castro Street. And the group, Daughters of Bilitis, was named after a poetry collection called Songs of Bilitis, written by Pierre Louis. I'm definitely mispronouncing that, I apologize, which is a collection of poetry that depicts a fictional lesbian woman who lived alongside Sappho in ancient Greece. And these two women are also really important because they were married on February 12th in 2004, and the very first same-sex wedding to take place in San Francisco after Mayor Gavin Newsom ordered the city clerk to begin providing marriage licenses to same-sex couples. However, that marriage was voided by the California Supreme Court on August 12th, 2004. But then they got remarried on June 16th, 2008, again in the first same-sex wedding to take place in San Francisco after the California Supreme Court's decision to legalize same-sex marriage in California. Unfortunately, 2 months later, on August 27th, 2008, Del Martin passed away, and Phyllis Lyon actually passed away this past April of 2020. But I think they are two women that are really important and that aren't often talked about, that I wanted to go ahead and bring up because they are truly two like very landmark historical figures. All right, and then this next person is Dan Choi. Dan Choi was a former lieutenant in the United States Army, and he came out publicly on the Rachel Maddow show in 2009, after which he was discharged from the New York Army National Guard. He came out as a way to protest the outdated don't ask, don't tell policies that the Army still had at the time and that all branches of the military had. And then later on, the next year, in March 18th of 2010, he, as well as another gay veteran, Captain James Petrangelo II, handcuffed themselves to the White House fence, demanding that Don't Ask, Don't Tell be repealed. That is the picture on the right of Dan Choi handcuffed to the fence outside of the White House. And then in 2010, Choi attended the signing of the bill that would remove homosexuality as a cause for dismissal from the Army. So he was really a huge landmark activist in getting this incredibly outdated and incredibly, in my opinion, gross rule where you couldn't talk about the fact that you were gay, that was grounds for being discharged from the Army, dismissed. And Choi has also co-founded an organization called Nights Out, which is an alumni organization for LGBTQ plus West Point graduates. He himself graduated from West Point. And that was a fairly controversial group because this would have been not long after Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed, and there was still, and I would argue there still is, an awful lot of stigma in especially traditionally like more masculine groups about like queerness and transness. And so I think that he's a really like fascinating person, and it might have been because I would have been 9 when this happened, but I had never really heard of him before, so I wanted to give him some spotlight as well. All right, and then this is Geneset Gutierrez. So Gutierrez is a transgender woman. She's also an undocumented immigrant from Mexico, and she is a community organizer for Familia Trans Queer Liberation Movement, which is an organization that supports Latinx LGBT people. And then in Los Angeles, Gutierrez became involved in a lot of LGBT protests, and she is kind of best known for interrupting former President Barack Obama while he was still president at the White House during a LGBT Pride Month celebration reception. This was in 2015, I believe. Yes. Where she began chanting "No more deportation," interrupting his speech, which was met with a lot of controversy at the time. And after the fact, Gutierrez said she was unhappy with the Obama administration's inaction regarding issues facing trans women and was further disenchanted with the administration's escalation of deportations. She was also named one of the Out 100, which is a kind of list of 100 people each year of different LGBT activists and celebrities and well-known public figures. And she has become a huge activist for LGBT, refugee, and undocumented people's rights. So I think she's, again, kind of an amazing person, and I wanted to give her some spotlight. And then, let's see, we're going to be discussing a couple of LGBTQ plus notable politicians. And I just have them all on one slide in an effort to try and keep this presentation much less long, because I could go on for a very long time about different historical figures. So we're going to start with the top row from left to right. So in the top left, we have Philippe Cunningham, who, along with Andrea Jenkins, who's the top right corner, became the first openly trans Black elected official in the United States. Philippe Cunningham was the first trans man. And then next we have Rachel Levine, who is the first openly transgender government official to serve in a Senate confirmed role, appointed by current President Joe Biden. And then mentioned previously in the top right, we have Andrea Jenkins, who became the first openly transgender Black official elected in the United States as the first trans woman. All right, bottom left, we have Mauree Turner, who is the first publicly non-binary US lawmaker, as well as the first Muslim member of the Oklahoma legislature. They were recently elected this past year. And then in the bottom center, we have Harvey Milk, who is relatively well known, but Harvey Milk, born May 22nd, 1930 to November 27th, 1978, was an American politician and the first openly gay elected official in the history of California. He was also famously assassinated by Dan White in 1978 after serving 11 months in office, and was a huge LGBTQ rights activist, also did a lot of union rights and workers' rights. And then finally, in the bottom right corner, we have Kate Brown, who is the first openly LGBT person elected governor in the United States. And she's the governor of Oregon, which I also think is really cool. So wanted to also highlight her because I think it's really amazing that Oregon had the first openly LGBT person elected governor. And I wanted to give that some spotlight. And there are a lot more notable LGBT politicians. This is just a very quick overview. And I also wanted to focus on people who were or are out during their time in office. A lot of notable politicians were either outed posthumously or came out during or after their terms. So that's kind of my rationale. And then I wanted to give a special shout out to Gilbert Baker, born June 2nd, 1951, and passed away March 31st, 2017. American artist, gay rights activist, and he also designed the rainbow flag, which has become an iconic pride symbol. And his flag is still used today. I'm sure we all recognize it. It is one of the most well-known symbols. He also really did not want the flag he designed to be copywritten or trademarked in any way. He wanted it to be fair use for anyone, which I also think is just really beautiful. And then in 1994, he, as well as a group of volunteers, created the world's largest flag at that time, to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the 1969 Stonewall riots. And then I'll kind of quickly go through the colors. These are both pictures of Gilbert Baker. And I'm going to be referencing the flag that he's holding in this rightmost picture. So we have, and his rationale behind the colors is as follows. Hot pink was meant to represent sex, red, life, orange, healing, yellow, sunlight, green, nature, turquoise, magic and art, indigo, serenity, and violet, spirit. And then often the flag has been kind of remade without hot pink and turquoise. And this is because at the time it was really difficult to get those specific dyes. So that's why it kind of became without those two colors. And also 6 colors was a lot easier to manufacture as well. So that's just a little history of the flag. All right. Are there any questions?
That was pretty cool, pretty informational. I definitely learned a lot about a lot of those people, was not aware. So that's kind of fun to now have that knowledge. And I'm glad that it's still 2021 because I still have a lot of things I got to do this year.
Definitely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm really excited to have been able to talk about one of my like kind of passions, which is queer history. So yeah, and then I kind of wanted to open it up and just say, why does this matter? And why is it important that we continue to talk about these historical figures?
Well,
Yeah,
like
I think the past. Go ahead, Lynn.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, that's kind of what we think about on WildX too, is like it's important to know where you've come from, what happened along the way to help you understand how we got to where we are now. And if, like, I'm all about living in the present moment, but if you don't learn from the history or the past, then you're not really getting very far, I don't think. So yeah, I think it is really important to have those historical figures noted, and to just know where they came from to help get to where we are today.
Yeah, I'm curious, B, were these people that you knew of just through your personal interest, or was this more of like a research project?
A little bit of both. I knew,
Both, yeah.
yeah, I knew a fair amount about the politicians and Gilbert Baker, but then Dan Choi and Public Universal Friend and Geneset Gutierrez, I had never really heard of, except maybe like briefly on the news once or twice, except for Public Universal Friend from the 1700s. And so I did a couple hours worth of research, like looking through different documents and kind of going through different kind of channels on the internet to find. It's really surprisingly, or maybe unsurprisingly, difficult to find kind of comprehensive lists of LGBT historical figures that aren't just kind of different permutations of the same 25 people that I feel like most people have heard of, because often when we talk about LGBT kind of activists, landmark activists, there's Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Riviera, Ellen comes up a lot. And while all of these people are incredibly important and it's important to talk about them, I wanted to try and focus on people that were maybe less well known, because I think it's really easy to tend to focus on the kind of more like palatable people throughout history. And I wanted to kind of challenge that and try and find people that I hadn't heard of, or that I wasn't as familiar with. So,
I think it's important to recognize those that the LGBT community from such a long time ago. And like the reason we obviously don't talk about those figures is just because it was like the don't ask, don't tell, very like hidden and, you know, closeted. So it's, yeah, I think that's such a great idea to have this presentation and bring up those historical figures. I am really interested in public universal friend. I think that's such a, like, especially from the 1700s, like that time period for that to even be conceptualized that way. Do you know of anything that's more modern day, like similar, comparable to that? I mean, would that be considered like, I guess just non-binary altogether? That's just another term for public universal friend, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to think. I think one of the kind of most less contemporary, like current times, but still a fairly well-known gender non-conforming historical figure would be someone like Marsha P. Johnson, who was a trans person, often referred to as a trans woman, but I feel like there's kind of a bit of debate on that, because often when people would ask her gender identity or any questions about her as a person, she'd always say like, pay it no mind, and really kind of played around with gender roles. Marsha P. Johnson was one of the kind of instrumental figures at the Stonewall riots, and then organized the first like Pride in New York in 1970, 1 year after the Stonewall riots as well, along with Sylvia Rivera. And then I'm trying to think of different non-binary like kind of celebrities now. Let's see, and of course now I can't think of absolutely anyone. India Moore is non-binary. They are one of the actors on Pose. Then Rebecca Sugar, who is an actor, writer, songwriter as well. For, I think most notably, the show Steven Universe is also non-binary. Jonathan Van Ness from Queer Eye identifies as non-binary. And yeah, but I really, like you said, I really am interested in this person from the 1700s that was identified against kind of all gender norms at the time.
Yeah, just to have the wherewithal to like be able to articulate that, as opposed to, you know, just feeling really, probably I would say, confused, and you're probably the only one, which is why I would think, being like the archangel, like you had said, they would probably feel that way.
Yeah, definitely. It is really interesting from like a religious studies perspective as well, to kind of study their philosophy, because they were like rejected by the kind of overall society of Friends, which was the kind of Quaker society. Really interesting, but like they formed a township, and yeah, which only lasted until the 1860s, but still really just kind of wild.
Yeah. Is this something that you are obviously very passionate, interested in? Are you going to be able to continue this after graduation, and or do you see kind of like a vision for a career in that?
Yeah. Oh, I never really have thought about it specifically. I'm a literature major, and most of my focus has been on kind of queer literary theory and queer studies in that sense. I do really want to go either into like archival sciences or library sciences post-graduation. And I would definitely love to be able to continue kind of preserving and highlighting LGBT histories.
You gotta write a book.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, with all compound all of the historical figures that you know, with like a brief bio of them, and like put that all in one space so that people could refer back to, almost like an encyclopedia.
Yeah, yeah, I would love to be able to do something like that. There is a really great book called can't remember the author's name. So I'm going to try and look it up really quick, but it's called Queer There and Everywhere. And it's a book which I have actually read, but then forgot about because I read a lot. But it's a book that is Sarah Prager. And it's was published in 2017, so it's still like fairly recent, and it's a collection of different LGBT historical figures that changed the world, and it's really, yeah, it's really interesting. And yeah, it has 23 chapters, which are all different people throughout history, dating all the way back to ancient Greece, and as contemporary as like present day. Oh, thank you for pasting that in there. So that's a book I definitely recommend. And it's a very like easy and interesting read.
Cool.
So, B, I was curious too. Did you come across any sports figures in your research?
Yes, there's a lot of sports figures, which I didn't include any like athletes really, because I know earlier this semester, I believe it was this semester, might have been last semester, and I could be misremembering. There was an amazing WildX on trans
Yeah,
athletes
yeah,
and kind
yeah,
of also like current politics around that. But yeah, there
yeah.
are a lot of landmark like queer and trans athletes that definitely merit a lot of looking into. I can't remember any names off the top of my head right
No,
now.
you're totally fine. And I was just thinking because it had me thinking back to
Mhm.
when, oh gosh, I'm totally blanking on his name now. Jason Collins was like the first openly gay NBA player, and but that was, I just remember at the time because I think that was about 10 years ago
Mhm.
and or more, and it just was kind of wild that like there's got to be more, and it's just like
Yeah.
it kind of is frustrating that the systems are like keeping them from being openly gay out. And then the NFL player Michael Sam, who like kissed his boyfriend on during
Mhm.
the draft, which was amazing. And but it feels like those were great, but it's like I feel like now it's like no one in those two leagues at least is out. But I'm a big fan of Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe, the
Yeah.
WNBA and the soccer kind of the
Mhm.
couple, and I think they're married now, and they've been super active in like political activism and giving out like vaccines, and so that's been really cool to watch. And
Oh, I love that.
yeah, and it's just interesting to think about kind of the intersectionality with race and gender, and not non-binary. And I learned a lot in my PhD about indigenous cultures and how they're not binary, and like two-spirit was a big thing in like the community, the native community, of like the idea that you can kind of fluctuate between the
Mhm.
two genders, and depending on the situation. And so I think it's just crazy how our society is so binary. It's like one or the other, and it's
Yeah.
mind-blowing to think about like it could have been another way. And like kids was saying that was such an interesting thing with the friends of the, like, totally
Public
blanking on it, but
university.
yeah, public, yeah, it's
Mhm.
just it's wild. And it's like obviously this is not new, it's just how people talk about it and how we see it in the media and everything is pretty fascinating. I'm always interested in kind of the media perception, so I'm
Mhm.
hoping that with sports it'll just get more and more, because it's interesting, because for a lot of people, for we think of race and gender, or race and gender is usually something that's like you can see it on some, and sometimes you may not know someone is
Mhm.
gay, or how they identify on the surface. So it's like I think getting to that deeper, like less
Mhm.
superficial level is super fascinating. So
Yeah, for
really
sure.
appreciate the presentation. Yeah.
Mhm.
Don't, I
Yeah.
didn't really have a question, but
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I
yeah.
think that the intersection of kind of sport and queerness is really interesting. And I'm not even like a huge kind of, I don't really follow sports myself, but I think just like the individual athletes are really like fascinating. And it is such, I don't want to use the term brave because that's so overused, but it is such like a radical thing to be in what I would consider very kind of traditionally masculine and feminine like roles. Sports is very like gender non-binary and kind of not and almost subvert that in a way. So yeah, I'm really interested in that too.
Yeah. Other questions, folks?
I have more of a comment just because I finally have my camera on because I've been walking around campus. Hi. And I don't know, and honestly, I don't know if B has mentioned this during their presentation, but we're actually hosting a podcast through Linfield that's literally on this. That's hopefully going up during like this month. And it's like the book that they had mentioned earlier. It's called Queer There and Everywhere. And we're talking about like media and news from a queer lens, and so we talk about a lot of different things. We have a lot of episodes like lined up. Some of them are literally what they talked about today with sports, about drag race, about movies and film. And so that's also something, at least on the Linfield campus, regarding like off of Coach Kibbs's question, or like continuing this after their presentation, like B is doing a lot, and essentially, so I don't know if they would have brought it up during the presentation, but just wanted to shout that out. Queer There and Everywhere. We're currently trying to figure out how to upload it, and so that's why it's on the back order a little bit. But yeah, we have 3 episodes done already, so that's exciting. But yes.
Really thank you, Kenna. I hadn't brought that up. So that was perfect. But yeah, Kenna and I host this podcast, and we both think it's really both very fun to do. And it's also really interesting to kind of pick one thing. Our first episode is on She's the Man. Speaking of like kind of the intersection of gender and sports.
Great movie.
Yes. For sure.
I bet it's very cringy now. I mean, I haven't seen it in probably 10
I had
years,
never seen it before, like a couple months ago, and it's certainly interesting.
It's like we've watched that like on the bus for trips to games.
I love that. It's a very fun movie.
I'm going to also throw a link into, because I keep thinking about this podcast I listened to this week about, so trans youth and policies around trans youth and sport has been in the news a lot lately. And it's so frustrating because it's like all these old white men who are like, this is about women's sports. And it's like, where were you talking about, like you haven't cared about women's sports at all. So you're full of it. But this podcast is really, it's a Vox Today Explained episode about kind of the entire, because it's a very fascinating topic, and it's a really, I think, a hard topic for a lot of people to wrap their head around. And there's this misconception, like we were saying, the media of like, oh, well, these trans women are coming in and dominating women's sports, when that's not really the story at all. That's not really the truth at all. So I'll put that in the chat too for folks. But feel free, folks, to jump in with questions.
Yeah, and then kind of along that same vein, I wanted to go ahead and throw out that both in the last week, Alabama and Arkansas, I believe, are trying to make it illegal for people under the age of 18 to access gender affirming healthcare, which would be things such as puberty blockers and HRT in before they are 18. So, which is really dangerous to and really detrimental to trans youth, because like access to like hormone replacement therapy and access to puberty blockers can quite literally be life-saving, because gender dysphoria is a very real and can be a very difficult thing to grapple with, especially as a young person already going through such a process as like puberty. So I wanted to go ahead and bring that up because I think it's important to talk about, and it's really important to keep like talking about and to keep following, because it is really, really scary that these things are still up for debate. And yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, that is, it's so upsetting, and it's just, it feels so absurd for the year that we're living in, and this kind of control that folks want to have.
Mhm.
And yeah.
Yeah, same. Thanks for bringing that up, B. I wasn't aware of that. That's good to know. And I think I jumped on late. I'm sorry that I'll go back and listen to the recording because I want to hear your presentation. But just had a conversation this morning with one of our co-presidents of SAC, and we've been rewriting the Constitution, and SAC is the Student Athlete Advisory Committee, and really, this is a tangent, but still, like everything Tristan Reese said the other day in that training is still percolating in my brain, of just like, there's so much good information in there, and just like being able to set your grammar settings to correct you or do autocorrect when you use gender specific language in your writing. Like, I was just like, that's brilliant. Like, I love that there are ways that we can help train ourselves to use the appropriate language in these situations, right? And so one of the things that the president and I were talking about is SAC has always had a male and female co-president. And I'm in listening to you today, B, I'm like, we need to change that language. That needs to be changed. We need to change it to currently the way the setup is, because you were on that conversation on trans sports, right?
Yeah.
And so currently we do have men's and women's sports, and that has not changed, but we can change it to a president who represents men's sports, a president who represents women's sports at Linfield. And so just trying to like think through that piece. I love opportunities, to have a conversation like this, because it helps me shake out those ways in which I had made assumptions or had patterns of thinking that I wasn't aware of. And so anyway, I guess here's here's what I'm saying. Thank you. Thank you for on this. It's really helpful information. It's good to think in this way too, and to start to shake it up.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we're trying to kind of help bring awareness to through the Writing Center at Linfield. I work there, and I have worked there since my freshman year, and we talk a lot about gendered language, and a lot of the pushback on using gender neutral language, especially the single third person pronoun they, them, theirs, is that it's grammatically incorrect, which is completely not true. So we do a lot of work with that too. I think it's really interesting, especially because English isn't necessarily a language like Spanish or French or Italian that is incredibly gendered, in the sense that there are male and female words for like they, the, and it, and like animals and whatnot. But it is still, English is incredibly gendered. And it's just so like deeply ingrained in language that it's really difficult and interesting to both kind of recognize that and also begin the process of breaking those down.
All right. Is this our end of Zoom?
I think so. Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, we really appreciate you being on today, B, and sharing this with us. And it's so nice and refreshing to have people on that are passionate and just love what they're doing and really into their research. It makes presenting and putting presentations a lot easier when you want to do it, doesn't it?
Yes, I completely agree.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, we'll save this recording and we'll throw it up on the YouTube, and we hope to see you back on here again.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I hope everyone has a nice day and enjoys the sun.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, B. You too. Great job.
Yeah. All right, I'll stop
That's the great
sharing.
work.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.